It's so funny in quarantine. I feel like a lot of people revisited or discovered the show for the first time.
Big time.
I found that like I'm getting recognized more with a mask and sunglasses on than ever before with no mask or sunglasses on.
Welcome to episode 2 of Entertainment Weekly's Binge of the Vampire Diaries. I'm Sam Heifel, and I'm joined by executive producer Julie Plec and series stars Nina Dobrev and Paul Wesley to talk all things season 2, one of my favorite top 2 seasons, one of my favorite seasons for sure. As I said with the first episode, we will stick mostly to season 2, but there is a series-wide spoiler alert on every episode of this podcast. If we decide to spoil the ending, it's going to happen. So I say watch the whole show before you come back and listen to any of these episodes. But as we're getting into it, Nina, you were sort of just saying off camera, like, do you all remember specific seasons of the Vampire Diaries? How does that work in your mind?
It kind of feels like one long episode that lasted 8 years. As we were prepping for this interview, I actually had to Google YouTube videos of recaps of season 2 to refresh my memory, to make sure that, like, because I thought we were only sticking to season 2. So I was like, hey, to make sure I don't say anything from season 3 or from season 1. So Paul, if you don't remember, here's a general recap.
Spoiler alert. I don't remember.
By the way, this is like the perfect example of like their 2 actor processes. Like Nina would have a binder full of notes and maps and charts for everything she's supposed to do. And Paul would be in the hair and makeup room at call being like, what are we shooting today?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still a consummate professional, but yeah, I'm a little bit more. No, but it's funny because I do need that recap, Nina. But for me, from speaking of like actors' processes, like from like a narcissistic actor perspective, when you say like, do you remember season 2? For me, I look at it like, there's BC and AD, before Christ and after death. For me, it's before Ripper, it's BR and AR after Ripper. So all I know is that like season 2, I was still a good guy. Yeah. And then towards the end, I started getting, so that for me, that's the only like gauge I have of time.
A good guy and henceforth
miserable.
Yeah,
exactly.
Henceforth unhappy.
Exactly. So Nina, what does happen in season 2? What's the,
Catherine returns, and at the end of season 1, Catherine kills Anders' character, which was
Uncle John.
Uncle John, and Daddy. And so Catherine returns and wreaks havoc, and then Tyler Lockwood's cousin or brother, what was he? Brother, cousin,
Mason Lockwood. Yeah,
Mason. Taylor,
great looking guy.
Taylor Kinney arrives, and he's looking for the Moonstone, because he wants to activate some sort of werewolf something or another. And then the originals are introduced, and Klaus is a hybrid vampire werewolf who then he wants to break some sort of a curse and either become full werewolf or full, I don't remember this part.
Full hybrid.
Full
Sun and Moon curse.
Okay, yes. It's all very blurry. I remember like at the time we were shooting it being confused and being like trying to stay on track.
It sounds for me like I remember when the season that the originals got introduced was one of my favorite seasons. I do remember that. So this must be it.
Yes, that's it. Your favorite season.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to start with, because season 2 kicks off with Catherine in modern day. Obviously, at that point, Nina, you played her in flashbacks, but this was like the big Catherine's in it now moment. And Julie and Kevin talked about in episode 1, like they, at the very beginning, weren't fully sure if you were going to play both characters. So like, what was kind of your introduction to, oh no, like I'm doing double duty on the show and I have to craft this entire other character?
They didn't tell me until like day of almost. I feel like for the same reason they weren't sure, so they definitely weren't going to tell me. But I feel like right before that episode, was it episode 6 of season 1, Julie? The Lost Boys, Lost Girls.
Yeah.
She was introduced, so then they gave me a heads up, and then, but it was gradual. Like the first episode was just like a couple flashbacks, and then they introduced her more and more. So I got to figure her out over the first season, and then by season 2, once she was like back in the flesh and she was in a lot more of the episodes, it was crazy schedule wise, shooting both of the roles, having to do Elena and Catherine, and shooting scenes with myself at times, was a wild learning experience, but really fun too. Cause I got to play 2 wildly different characters and play around and do and say things that I would, especially at the time, never dare think and say out loud, because I was like a self-proclaimed good girl when I got this show, and then slowly became more evil as I embodied Catherine. I learned a lot from her. She and like kind of grew up and got more confident with the writing. It was pretty interesting.
Julie, what was it like for you all to, I mean, Catherine is one of the greatest villains, if not the greatest villain of the Vampire Diaries. What was it like? You'd written her in flashback, but to kind of write and introduce this character, what did you guys feel like she kind of added to the modern day mix of it all?
Well, it really was, in a lot of ways, she was like the Lady Damon, you know? She always had the snark, the witty comeback, the one-liner, you know? That's what we were talking about in the first episode. That sounds like the beginning of a love story, not the end of one. You know, hate is love turned inside out, and all those great things. So writing her was always so fun because she was so unfettered and wild and could say whatever she wanted and be that big and bold. But I just remember, I mean, just the logistics of that season, because, you know, when you shoot a scene with Nina playing Elena and Catherine, you're shooting the scene with Nina playing Elena and a stand-in, and standing in place and acting against Nina. And then you have to shoot the whole scene all over again with Nina in the other role. And so everything you're shooting twice. And we didn't really think of that when we started writing the show. It didn't totally occur to us that it would basically double the shooting time of every scene. And so it got to the point where Nina was just like, had been working so hard and was so beaten down that we, moving forward, had to just write less Catherine Elena, because it was just too much. It was like, you know, all day, every day.
I remember carrying around 2 separate scripts, one for each character, because I had to like break down what Elena was going through in that episode and what her intentions were, and then having a separate script for what Catherine wanted out of every scene and every circumstance. And then even the physicalities, like I had to kind of draw out and map out like what I would do as each character so that I could react as the other person. Like if Elena rolled her eyes, I'd have to make sure Catherine clocked it. Or if Catherine said something bitchy, then Elena would have to also react to that. So I remember it like being very meticulous about those specific things. It was really challenging, but really fun. And like Julie mentioned, exhausting at times to have to
was it Klaus?
Sustain that energy.
Klaus was the episode where she basically is talking to Catherine inside the tomb. And so Catherine's like all dried out on one side, and then
I think that's Katerina, isn't it?
Katerina, thank you. Yeah. Katerina. Yeah, that's right. Klaus was 19. There's like probably 20 pages of dialogue of the 2 of them just talking.
Stefan, now you're here. I brought you some things. You came to bribe me. What is it that you want? I want you to tell me about Klaus. You've been busy.
She started as a stand-in and was just reading lines, but she was so good that
Brittany.
Brittany. She was really good and like gave you what you needed. So you're actually acting against somebody as opposed to just like a random person.
Yeah, she was really good to work with, especially because I would give her the other script that I had, and I would do it once the way I kind of wanted to do it. And then she was really good at mimicking and redoing it so that it was still, because then later, if she had because you'd still see the back of her head and her body language. So if she did something, then I would have to match to what she did if it wasn't what we planned together. So there was a lot of planning involved. And as stupid as it is, just the hair and makeup time too, to switch over from each character. I don't remember. What did you guys do in the hour that it took to switch over? Like, did you film something else to save the time?
Yeah, we would always schedule it. So it was either like happening over, like breaking you for an early lunch, or, you know, a small scene that we could fit in the middle. Cause I think it was a full hour to like, or maybe even an hour and 45 to like take you all down and then build you back up.
It's so funny, like hearing all this, like I don't know. It's all in the back of my brain, like in my subconscious. And now hearing all of this, like the switch over time, Brittany reading off camera, this, and then you with the binders, like I have vivid memories of all of this that I haven't actually thought about in 10 years. You know, I'm going down this like visceral memory lane, like imagining everything. It's so wild. I'm just going to continue listening.
Well, I told Julie before we started, we have to touch on Masquerade because it's one of the best episodes of the series. But for you two, it was also, that was the like Catherine, Damon, Stefan fight scene, which like, I feel like you probably remember shooting.
That was, by the way, that particular scene. I don't remember. Everybody was so mad at each other. I don't remember why, but also it was a Friday night and we were on stage. Well, the one where you're like throwing stakes at each other in the hotel room was a stage piece.
Oh, you're right.
And
I wasn't in that, was I?
Yeah, you were in that too. It was the two brothers against Catherine. It was like it was like the Lockwood Mansion, Lockwood Mansion, like tea room, but we built it.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I don't remember this scene.
But the way production's supposed to work is that you start early on a Monday at like 7:00 in the morning. And then by the time you get to Friday, you know, you might have a night shoot outside. So you want to be like a later call. And sometimes you have really late calls. The worst thing you can do for anybody is what we did. I don't even know why it happened that way, but we were on the stage on a Friday, but like with a 5:00 call. So you're not even outside. There's no, PM. There's no reason to be like shooting 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. except for just the schedule happened to fall that way. Oh. And that scene took so long. And I think we wrapped at like 8:00 in the morning. Like, I think we watched the sun come up and it was terrible. And everyone was in a bad mood and everyone was all pissed off at each other.
We didn't watch the sun come up. We left work and drove home when the sun was coming up.
Right. And then tried
because it was dark inside
to fall asleep at 9 a.m. Yeah. It's so, I really believe like firmly in my heart that shows would be so much better in terms of just like longevity, actor happiness, quality, everything. Not that Vampire Diaries season 1 and 2 were amazing quality, but I do think we got burnt out. I think everyone should shoot like 3 weeks on and then 1 week off. I think it would be the solution to everything.
I agree.
Especially on 22 a year, you know, I just, Anyway, it has nothing to do with this podcast. It's just, it's just a lot of episodes. 22 episodes is a lot to shoot, a lot to write, a lot. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I remember that day too, Julie. That was kind of one of my breaking points of exhaustion was that specific episode. There was so much Catherine and all those night shoots. And I think I was like 22 years old at the time.
Yeah, you were very young.
And still then was like so exhausted to the core of my being. I don't think I could do that now at 32. Right. Wow, 32. Right. So old.
Years. So old. But just circling back on the final thing on Catherine, that really like is when she clicked for me. I mean, she was epic from the jump, but like, I think it was episode 4. It was Rob Hardy's episode. And it was the first time we flashed back again in season 2. And I don't even remember what her story was in that episode that directly, but I remember the end of the episode when Catherine, there's a Sarah Bareilles song playing, and Catherine is like out on a dirt road and she's just like staring up and longingly for something. And you realize like, this is a character that wants something, that needs something emotionally. Like she is being driven by a deeply personal want here. And that sort of became the rule on the show, that if you have a villain, the villain has to be, and we've talked about this a lot, the villain has to be the hero of their own story. And not just in like that, I like to be a bad person chasing power, but in like, I have lost a love that I must avenge, or I am doing this for my child, or whatever, like something that is just a deeply personal rooting interest for them. And so that's the moment where I fell in love with Catherine as a hero of her own story. I had so much empathy for her in that moment.